Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to an unexpected podcast, New Year's edition, or at least New Year edition. Welcome to 2023. This is our first record of 2023. I hope everybody had a good holiday and a good new year. Today, we're going to talk about three things. We have a list by an undisclosed listener who asked to remain anonymous, no doubt because he is a high-powered government official who wants to make sure that he doesn't receive any death threats as a result of the fact that he's posting lists or listening to our podcast. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some new terrain releases from Games Workshop, some Gondor terrain that looks great and kind of expands on the terrain that came in the box set. And then we're going to revisit an old topic. A long time ago, we went through various cycles of our top 5 lists of different things. And some of those have now changed because of the new FAQs and various items that have come out in new releases. So we thought we'd revisit that. And we're going to go through our top 5 releases and also some top 5 releases from Rainier and Rob, who are sending theirs in virtually. They're both on childcare duties this morning and couldn't join us, but they've sent in their top 5, and we're going to talk about those. Okay, so I think to start off, we are going to talk about the list from our unknown listener, which I'm going to put up in a second, and then maybe, Evan, you can do the read through here.
All right, so our mystery listener appears to have a Thranduil's Hall's Survivors of Lake Terran Alliance. It's at 650 points. They've got Thranduil with heavy armor and the 2 swords, 4 palace guards with shields and spears, 4 elves with shields, 2 elves with bows and glaives, 1 elf with bow, a sentinel, and a Mirkwood cavalry with shield. Second warband is Legolas on horse, 1 Mirkwood cavalry with shield, 2 elves with glaives, 4 elves with shield, 3 elves with bows and glaives, 1 elf with bow, and another sentinel. And then in the third warband is a militia captain with 4 Lake Town militia with spears and 2 Lake Town militia with bows and spears. So all in all, this comes out to 34 models. And just quickly calculating the bows here, that's 2 Lake Town militias with bows, and then it looks like 5 and 4 elves with bows, so that's 9. So that's 11 bows in total, plus Legolas and his 3 shots. So so first impressions.
Wait. Before you go there, there's just a few notes from our mystery listener. So he's planning to take this to a tournament for 650 points. That's good versus evil, random scenarios with no restrictions. And one key point that he noted here is that the lack of banner is deliberate, as Thranduil is the key piece, and from his experience, he absolutely feels like he needs a second sentinel to get Thranduil into position, and that 2 sentinels and Legolas may very well be enough to get rid of enemy banners. So that's just a note why there is no banner, in case you wanted to mention it. So go ahead, Aaron.
All right. So yes, that's all very true. The first thing that we should probably point out is that
there's no banner.
Yes, there's no banner, in case you didn't notice from the comment that he literally left. But other than that, this list is actually 652 points.
Yeah, we need like a
Yes.
buzzer we can hit when that happens.
Yes, so according to my list building software, which is very reliable, this came out to 652 points. So just to correct that before you send that in to whichever tournament you're going to, probably just drop a glaive off a bowman or something like that, and it should be good. Thoughts on the actual list, however, and not just how many points it is. I like this list. I think the choice of the 2 sentinels is interesting, and obviously the person said that they prefer these 2 sentinels and they don't want to switch them out. That's obviously not the choice I would make, but it's a choice that they're making. Some things that I feel are missing in this list, especially with the fact that this is going to be a good versus evil tournament. I feel like having the crown on Thranduil, if you can, is just so important. Because last time I played against a list very similar to this at a 650 point good versus evil tournament, I won my game against that person, mainly specifically because they didn't have the crown on Thranduil. And not having that crown can be quite problematic, especially against horde armies, which evil is very good at making, and which are especially good at 650 points. As to how I would fit the crown in, obviously the first thing I would do, which we can't do in this situation, is I would take out one of the sentinels and put in a crown instead. But because that's not an option, it makes things a little more tricky. There's a couple ways to do this. One of them is to just drop 2 elves, which should get you down to roughly the right number of points, which will drop you 2 models and then get the crown that way. An alternative would be to turn a decent number of elves into Lake Town militia guys as well. But that sort of weakens your army in the sense that you no longer have a large number of elves to use, and it's more 50-50 with Lake Town militia and elves. And it also decreases your shooting power in the same vein. So that's a couple of ways of dealing with that. But I'd say my advice would be to just try and fit in the crown, is if you possibly can.
Yeah, that's interesting because that was the exact same thing. That was the exact same thing I was going to say is that it strikes me that in a good versus evil tournament, this list needs the crown. And I also was going to drop a sentinel to do it. I hadn't noted the supplemental restriction that was put on this list that they wanted 2 sentinels. Okay, that's fine. I actually usually end up taking no sentinels, but I could see where in a good versus evil tournament where you're going to have some lower courage out there, why you'd want at least 1. I mean, another option to get that crown, which would get you at least some of the way, would be to take Legolas off of his horse. I mean, I know the argument for keeping him on the horse. He has more hitting power. That's, I think, less of an argument these days now that wraiths can just zap people's horses out from under them. And Legolas in particular is somebody who I think is kind of less useful on a horse than other people, than you might think, because, oftentimes he's, kind of hiding somewhere and shooting, but, the mobility and the shooting, giving him the extra range, may be worth it. It's just, it's an option. Otherwise, I think, I mean, at 34 models, I think at 650 points, you can stand to lose a model or 2. I kind of like the option of changing at least some, maybe drop like 1 elf with bow and glaive, or 1 elf with shield, and then change a couple other guys, or a couple other elves, either with glaive or with shield, into militia spear or militia with shields. Might be the way to go, but I agree that if I was pushing this list in a good versus evil tournament, I'd want the crown on.
Yeah, I also agree with the crown, especially because the good versus evil, because of the numbers. So that's always useful. And yeah, it feels to me that the two sentinels are cool, but if the goal here is that you're trying to use the two sentinels and Legolas to take out a banner, then any player who notices that is gonna just surround the banner with, let's say, 3 models. Then even if you were to move 2 of them away, there is always a third one to pick up the banner. So I don't think that's necessarily a very reliable strategy to try to take out the banners. So personally, I wouldn't necessarily play the second Sentinel. I mean, it's cool for good versus evil, but I don't know. I just feel like there are better uses of the points, like the crown or like a banner, or both ideally. Although it's quite hard to actually be able to fit both of them in.
Well, I mean, if this were my list, I'd have no sentinels and I'd have a banner in the crown.
Sure. I mean, alternatively, I would also say, like, if you wanted to keep one sentinel and you really wanted to have both banner and the crown, then you can possibly swap some elves for some militia. But the more militia you have, the quicker your army falls apart. So that actually also makes me wonder whether the whole militia contingents should even be there in a sense, because the captain and 6 militia is what, 75, 76 points, something like that.
Yeah, but you need a march, so you need a captain, and once you put in an elvish captain, I mean, it's 600. I mean, the classic list, if you were just to keep it pure, would be Thranduil, Legolas, Palace Guard captain, and at 650 points, you end up with a very small list if it's pure elves.
Yes.
So I think this is a reasonable way to get 2 more might points, a march, and a few extra guys to bulk up your numbers. They can just kind of like stand behind elves and say, I'm an extra attack.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I wouldn't remove the captain.
Now, so in that case, I'm thinking, what if in that case you went in the opposite direction? So let's say you drop both sentinels and actually added more stuff to the Lake Town people, like 6 more militia or something like that. Out of that, you wouldn't necessarily, like, I would still take a banner, but if you're not someone who really wants the crown, you can also try to overcome enemy numbers by just increasing your own numbers too.
Well, but it's not enough, right? I mean, it's 650 points. You're talking about evil lists that can be upwards of, they're going to be upwards of 50 models.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And, having 2 or 3 more having 37 models versus 34 models isn't really going to move the needle tactically. Certainly not in the same way having, a terror bubble is going to move the needle.
Yeah, no, for sure. Does the terror bubble or the crown require you to have will points still?
Just double
checking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, if you're facing ring wraiths, then the crown is useless anyway.
It's not useless. It forces the ring wraiths to invest a significant amount of resources to get rid of Thranduil's will.
Also, remember Thranduil has an elven cloak, so he can hide before combat hits.
Sure.
So when combat hits is when they're going to have to sap will Thranduil, and that's when your wraith and other magic users are going to want to do a whole bunch of other things as well. So it will draw will points to Thranduil, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like find ways how to change anything in this list, and it's almost like the Sentinel and the other Sentinel for the crown and the banner seem to be like almost the only options.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, you could. There's a lot of glaives in this list. There's let's see, 5, 7 glaives in this list. So that's 14 points of glaives, which is a lot of points of glaives that, if you wanted to drop say the two elves with glaives. Let me just see how much a base elf costs here. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I mean,
but
if you dropped all
it's
the
9.
glaives, you could almost have 3 more militia with spears.
Yeah, so I mean that's so the two elves with glaives on their own are that's 22 points.
Mhm.
So Lake Town Militia are what, 5 and then 6 with a spear, is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there's 6 with a spear.
So that's 2 more Lake Town Militia just bodies. And then or you could, drop an elf bow, or just drop a bow from one of the elves, and you could get 4 more Lake Town Militia. So that's a way to go with spear.
I'm just personally not a fan of elves with glaives. I tend not to ever use them just because they're just so expensive and they're still defense 5, right? So
Yeah, the reason to give, at least in my mind, the reason to give elf glaives is if they're going to stand behind something else cheaper. As opposed to this strategy, which seems to be to have the higher armored elves in front, and the militia spear behind. And I think there's a fair argument here that that's not the most cost-effective way to go, and maybe get a fruit of, so like the two elves with bow, and there's 2 elves with bow and glaive. There's actually there's 5 elves with bow and glaive, and that is 65 points, I think, right there.
that's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot of points. I mean, if you drop 2 elves, if instead of dropping the 2 elves with glaive, you drop 2 elves with bow and glaive, you could give one of the other elves with glaives a bow and still get 4 more Lake Town Militia spearmen to stand behind random stuff, and maybe you create some more elves with shields. I don't know. There may be a way. I think there's a way you can kind of bulk up the numbers or get some. I mean, dropping 2 elves with bow and glaive gets you either the banner or the Circlet of Kings too, plus like 1 extra point to throw a shield on one of these militia guys or something.
I mean here, this sort of reminds me of what I was playing at last Articon, where I had elves with shields, Legolas, and then I had Menastirith supporting them. And I was also trying to like maximize number of bows per contingent, like per ally. So here, for example, you can just add a militia guy with a bow and spear without breaking your bow limit for that contingent. So if you were to, let's say, drop a couple of elves with bows and glaives, you'd be able to maximize the militia. You wouldn't be losing both numbers. And then you could try to like somehow also maximize your bow numbers whilst removing the glaives. So there is a way, I think, to optimize this better, where you have your front line of defense 6 elves. They are supported by Lake Town Militia. And then you have your elves with bows supported by Lake Town Militia with bows and spears. So
Yeah.
that's where I'd be cutting all the glaives if I could.
Yeah, and I guess remember, we need to keep in mind that we need 2 points somewhere. So somebody's got to lose a bow or a glaive or something like that.
Yeah, I think the simplest thing would just be to drop a glaive off of someone. But yeah, I think the way, if we needed to maintain the 2 sentinels, which it seems like we do, what I would do is I would drop a lot of the glaives off the bowman, maybe all of the glaives off the bowman. Then I would turn some elves into Lake Town militias with a spear or bow and spear. And then I would slot in the crown. I think that's what I would do if I were to take this list.
Yeah, I think if I were to do it, I would probably drop some bow glaive guys. And then I would probably drop some spears off the lake, or change some spears off the Lake Town militia to shields.
Okay, that I wouldn't do.
Well,
I don't want my Lake Town militia in the front at all.
Oh, no, me either. Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
okay. I think I would probably do that with a couple guys, if for no other reason, because it's entirely possible this Lake Town Militia warband is going to be fighting on its own. And it wants some guys in front with the higher armor. And I don't have a problem with like two guys with shields in front of an elf with a bow and a glaive or something like that. But I'd do some combination like that. Make this Lake Town Militia warband, give it the ability to fight on its own if it has to. Because right now it's, well, I mean, right now is meat if it ends up having to deploy on its own. And I mean, granted, if you give a couple guys shields, it's going to be slightly less meat, but at least it can form some sort of mini shield wall on its own.
Yeah, cool. No, I think
Alrighty.
yeah, I think that's about all we can say.
All we need to say, really. Okay, so the other thing that we wanted to talk about here before we kind of get into the main event, if I can bring it up here, is we've got some upcoming terrain releases here. So let me pop this up on the screen. So hang on a second, wrong screen. There we go. Okay, so there's been a recent announcement from Games Workshop that they're coming out with some new Gondor terrain. We've got it up on the screen here. There are going to be 3 packages, one of which is, let's see here, one of which is an Osgiliath Ruins pack, which is going to be the modular ruins that show up in that many of us have already received inside our new Battle for Osgiliath box set. Which, by the way, I've assembled and put together. They paint up very quickly. Unlike the Dol Guldur set, which seems like I think I've been painting this Dol Guldur set for most of my life now. I've actually got 3 pieces on the table, but these Osgiliath Ruins sets assembled, and I painted them up very quickly, and they look great. So it looks like there's a package of those. You get 4 sets in the box set. I'm guessing just by looking at the picture here of the cover, you're going to get 2 sets when they get sold separately. But there's 2 other ones. There's a Gondor Mansion and then a Gondor Tower. So this is the Gondor Mansion, which is a 2-story building with, it looks like a removable roof. And I can't really tell. I'm trying to see if there's oh, I see. So there's an open first floor that you can so you can walk underneath this thing. And they do say it's completely modular, so you can mix and match these in with the ruins. So you can have a partially ruined mansion.
That is really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And you can mix ruined floors in there, and they have some conversion kits. I'm really looking forward to this. When these come out, I'm going to buy a bunch of these, and I'm going to be playing Legos with them, and seeing what kind of fun stuff I can create out of these things. So that's the mansion, and then equally cool are those are the ruins up there on the screen. We've seen them before, but those like I said, paint up really nicely and really quickly. And then we also have the tower, and this is the big giant tower that you see being blown apart by a catapult during the invasion of Osgiliath scene, and it's got the ruined top, and I believe that swaps out, so you can have like the unruined top, and then at some point when you want to have it blown up, you can replace it with the blown up top, which is really fun. I don't believe each stage is removable, so that I don't think you can kind of fight your way up this thing. But even so there's a view of the kind of unblown up top versus blown up top. And
that is really cool.
Yeah, both of those look great. And by the way, I was really surprised about how nice these looked with just a quick painting job. I mean, if you look at the Doggle door set, there's a whole bunch of steps you need to go through in order to paint those. And that's part of the reason why it takes so long, is you spend like hours on hours just, you know, painting and weathering these kind of iron strappings that come on them. They look great when you're done, but you take forever. But these, I just took like an a tan olive base. Yeah, I spray painted them black, dry brushed them with a tan olive base, or actually kind of wet brushed them with a tan olive base, then dry brushed them with a Terminatus stone dry brush, and then, you know, did a few of the details on it did them with the dry brush, and then just hit all the wood with the wildwood contrast paint, you know, did a few of the details on the doors and stuff like that, and then just, you know, kind of dabbed on some of the new wash colors that they have, which they have some new kind of grime and kind of a washed out green wash color in the Citadel paint range, and I was done with these. So it literally, each one of these took like, I think maybe like less than 45 minutes to paint. Once I finally had them assembled, they're really quick. And they're great pieces. They look great when you're done, but looking forward to these.
Something tells me that like these are going to be very popular on tournament tables, especially in competitions where people bring their own terrain to basically to donate to the tournament, and then everybody shares the terrain and plays on different boards. There's been some events I've been to here where that happened, and yeah, if these are very popular for people to just own, they'll be all over the tables on tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, the only downside to these vis-a-vis the Doggle door terrain sets is that the Doggle door terrain sets are bigger. These, at least, I mean, obviously I haven't seen these new kits, I don't know how big they are, but the ruins kits up here, when you actually assemble them, are about like 6 inches on a side. They're like 6-inch sides. And the Doggle door terrain pieces are, I mean, they're big. They are, you know, once you fully assemble them, they're, you know, and kind of like put all the basing around them, they're kind of like, I mean, they're like a foot wide. And I mean, it's roughly the same, because you actually get 2 pieces of these in each kit, but once you assemble them, at least as directed, they kind of create smaller buildings, you know, which is fine. I think they probably each kit probably ends up being responsible for taking up the same amount of table space, but the individual, you're going to have a bunch more kind of smaller buildings with these kits. So just something to keep in mind when you're putting them together.
I mean, these are like a massive upgrade compared to what we had in the Return of the King box, what, in 2005.
Yeah.
2004.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's another kind of minor downside. I'm not sure it's really a downside, but these are not as compatible looking with those prior Osgiliath ruins as you would think they might be. Because the scale is different. The sides of the windows and door openings and the floor sizes are different in that the original Osgiliath ruins are kind of on a larger scale than these are. And when you put them side by side, even when you painted them in a similar fashion, they look somewhat off. I think if you can get away with it if you kind of put them in different parts of the table. I think if you have like your old Osgiliath ruins in one section, your new Osgiliath ruins on another. But if you put the 2 of these side by side, they don't look like the same kind of architectural scheme. So, all right. Well, that's the new stuff there. Okay, so should we talk top 5 models?
Cool. Should we start with?
All right.
Should we start with Rainier's? Was it?
Yeah, let's start with Rainier's.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pull up. Rob also sent his in, so I'm going to
nice.
pull up I'm going to pull up his and we can talk through his too. I'll be Rob, you be Rainier. So why don't we start with Rainier, Mick? So I think, so the way we did this before is we're going to go through, we're going to talk through the profiles and, just, briefly kind of go through the statistics and what stuff you can put on them and the little goodies you can buy for them and how they get used on the table. And then we can chat through how we think, how valid we think the recommendation is. I think we're going to go from, so let's start at 5 and we'll go up to 1. So what was Rainier's 5th choice?
So Rainier's 5th choice was Elendil, High King of Gondor and Arnor. So if we were to say it the way Rainier would normally say it, which I'm not gonna even try because I would butcher his accent. So Elendil, he is a quite an expensive character in the Last Alliance. He is, I believe, 200 points once he's with like his horse and shield, right? Yeah, I think he starts.
Yeah, he's 200 with horse and shield.
Yeah, so he starts on 185. He's very strong. He's got fight 7, strength 5, defense 8 if you give him a shield, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6, I believe it was. 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. He has the permanent dual resistance to magic, so he rolls always 2 dice to resist, which is his biggest benefit, because he's generally very, very difficult for Ringwraiths to kill, or pretty much for anybody to kill. And alongside his strength 5, he's got his Master Forge sword. So he will, like, he's kind of a really good killing machine where he can take out even big heroes on like a 4+. So if even if his opponents are defense 7, he takes them down on 4s. If they're defense 5, he takes them out on 3s. And additionally to that, he gets to call 3 heroic combats every turn. So yeah, he's just like a massive killing machine. If you play Numenor, you basically want to play him, unless you prefer his son, Isildur, due to the ring. But generally, whenever Elendil appears on the table, he's just the main piece that needs to be taken out. Otherwise, he's just going to butcher your whole army. That's roughly all there is about him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the only real downside, Elendil, I think, comes with 2 downsides. One is his point cost, which is large,
expensive,
which can make him kind of cost prohibitive in smaller games. And the other is the fact that if you're taking Elendil, it's very hard to ally in anybody else other than elves, who are also very expensive. So he's not a piece that can be dropped into any army. Most of the time, if you're taking Elendil, you're taking either a pure Numenor army, which comes with drawbacks because it doesn't have a lot of pieces, at least not yet, until GW grabs the license for Rings of Power, and or you can ally in elves. And once allying in elves means you're allying in even more expensive models beside your expensive Elendil model. So
yeah, I mean, so like you said, there's 2 main drawbacks, but like really the biggest drawback is the fact that he does have to lead the army of Numenor, which sadly is kind of, it's just not that amazing by itself.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to. I mean, Evan, I don't know if you want to chat about it, but Evan just took a list that a Red Alliance with Elendil.
Red Alliance.
All I'm gonna say is watch this space. There may be a more there may or may not be a more detailed explanation of my opinions on Elendil later on in this podcast.
Red alliances are banned at certain competitions, so
and those competitions are wrong. and dumb because there's no reason they should be banned. But anyways,
I mean, no,
moving on.
I agree. I agree.
Moving
There is
on.
there is no reason they should be banned.
All right. So why don't I talk through Rob's submission here? And Rob's submission is Rutabi, General of the Dragon Legion. And Rutabi is a woman, Easterling infantry hero, and a hero of valor. She is in the new Defense of the North source book. She's on foot, so she's move 6, fight 6, strength 4, defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, 3 might, 2 will, 2 fate. So she comes with heroic strike and heroic challenge. So she's kind of like a tier 1.5 hero. She's not really a tier 1 hero like Elendil. But she's definitely more than kind of a fight 5 tier 2 hero, which puts her in an interesting place on the list. And she comes with some special rules. She has unyielding combat stance. So if somebody charges her on horse and wins, there's a 50% chance she's going to pop right back up like a Weeble, and they're not doubling their strikes against you. And she also comes with a Master of Battle 3+. So she copies actions, her other people's heroic actions on a 3+, which is a great way to kind of bulk up the Easterlings' might count artificially, because they tend not to have that much might. And that ability to copy other people's might really kind of keeps them in the might game longer than you'd otherwise think. She also comes with a phalanx special rule. So she fits into the phalanx, and she can back up with 2 folks with pikes behind her. And the show no mercy special rule, which means when she's making strikes against an enemy model that's trapped, she rerolls fail to wound rolls. So if you can get somebody trapped, get somebody either knocked down with Borgir's tremor, or just get people behind her, she can do a lot of damage really quickly. I'll be putting Rutabi on my list later, and I'll talk about the tactical aspects of Rutabi, I think, later when we talk about that. But she really does kind of transform the Easterling army in a way I think it needed to be transformed. So we've kind of laid out the stats, and like Evan said, I think we're going to put a pin in Rutabi and come back and discuss her later. So Evan, what's your nomination for number 5?
Right, number 5 is also an Easterling hero, but it is one that is more expensive and I think more controversial as well, and that is the Dragon Emperor. And knowing the other people on this podcast, well, I will discuss the Emperor in depth, and then perhaps we will hold off on people's opinions of it to a later time. So the Dragon Emperor, just quickly going over their stats, they're basically just a classic high tier hero. So they've got fight 6, strength 4, defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6, 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. But obviously this isn't the main draw of the Dragon Emperor. The real draw is the Palanquin, which is a 12-inch banner, which means that it counts as a banner, which is obviously huge. A 12-inch banner is massive, as shown by both Bard and Imrahil. And it also gives +1 fight value to your Easterlings within 6 inches, which is extremely good because it brings your Easterlings from fight 4, which is all right, to fight 5, which is extremely strong, especially when you have a phalanx with 3 attacks per set of models, and a banner on top of that, meaning that you're winning most fights with your phalanx. Among other things he's also got an elven made sword. He's got resistant to magic, which is super good. It means that it's much less easy for for magic users to take him down, to transfix him, bring him into a vulnerable position. And on top of that, he's also got an unlimited range stand fast, and it affects Easterling hero models. So basically, if you break and he is still on the board and he's able to move, your entire army is staying alive. And all of these things he gets for 170 points, which is bargain basement, I would say. And he's also not bad in combat at all. Obviously, he's not mounted, so he doesn't get the knockdown, but he gets the 6 additional attacks from his warriors holding the palanquin, which in my opinion makes absolutely no sense, because how are they attacking when they're also holding up a big frame? But they get it.
They have another hand.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that's my reasoning for the Dragon Emperor. Because of his lack of maneuverability and his large base size, I didn't want to put him any higher than number 5, but just because of the huge bonuses he provides to his list, and just how cheap he is, I couldn't not put him on my list.
Yeah, the Dragon Emperor is on my list too, so I'm going to wait to talk a little bit more about him. So
he's not on my list.
He's not on Mick's list.
No.
But yeah, I the one word I would use to describe the Dragon Emperor at this stage, before we kind of talk more later, is transformative. And I think that's really what he is for the Easterlings.
Cool.
All right, Mick, you want to do your own nomination
Sure.
here?
Let's do it. On my number 5, I've actually put Shagrat, the war leader. So the reason for that is that I've been playing with him on multiple events now in the UK, and he is just one of those things where no one really plays Shagrat very much, but he's just very solid overall. So he comes with he costs 115 points when fully kitted out, and you should always get him out. He is fight 5, strength 5, defense 7 with his shield, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 4, which is his major downside, 3 points of might, 3 points of will, and 3 points of fate, which is quite rare for these somewhat minor heroes in a sense. And additionally, when he charges, he gets the knockdown bonus as if he was cavalry against any foot enemies. And he's got the Blood and Glory special rule, which allows him to regain might points whenever he kills a hero. And he gets to also call heroic challenges against more enemies than anyone else in the game, because he is a hero of fortitude, and despite that, I still haven't used it.
I was going to say, and that the increased number of challenges is equal to 0.
Yes, it is. He gets the opportunity to call all these extra challenges, so that he never will call a single challenge in his life ever.
Yeah.
Although I did think of one instance where I would actually do a heroic challenge, but I haven't been in a situation to do it yet. So I'm going to leave that.
What is that instance, out of curiosity, or have you already forgotten?
No, the instance was that if my opponent had someone like Saruman the White or one of the other Sarumans who was the army general, challenging that guy means you if he decides not to accept, he loses his stand fast, and that's the main reason why he's in the army. But right, other than Saruman the White, I don't think I would ever challenge any other hero in the entire game.
And what about Galadriel?
Which one?
I don't know.
I mean, she can just deny it.
Well, yeah, she can deny it. I mean, what that does is it prevents her. It prevents her heroic other people from benefiting from her heroics, doesn't it? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah,
it does, but I don't know how worth it that is.
A bit of a waste of a point of might, because Galadriel, like if if you're beating her in combat, like you want to color her strike because she's fight 6. So you want to ensure that you win that combat. And then when you knock her over with strength 5 and against defense 3, even with the rerolls on fate, you should be able to kill her. Whilst against someone like Saruman, you might not. So
Yeah, I actually am not certain of that, especially if she's got the. I mean, that's one of the problems with Galadriel is unless you were really well the first time, if she's got the mirror nearby, she keeps on popping back up. But yeah, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, like causing 6 wounds on 3s isn't that hard. Especially,
yeah,
especially if you.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, so Shagrat in general, he's kind of relatively cheap for what he brings to the table because he happens to be pretty much the same hero as like the Imrahils dismounted, or he's been in so many combats for me where I just put him in there and I just thought, well, either my opponent calls a heroic move and charges Shagrat with something, or if Shagrat goes first, he will probably kill something. And if it's my opponent's big hero, then if I win a strike off, chances are the hero's dead. So very often it's just one of those situations where he's just there and he's a threat, but if he dies, it doesn't matter to me. And yeah, he's just very good value generally.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
So why don't we go to my personal choice for number 5, which was the Lake Town.
I was just gonna butt in here and just say sort of provide a counterpoint to why I don't think Shagrat should make a list like this. And I think it's going to be a counterpoint that I'm going to be using a lot in this episode, which is that there are a lot of models like Shagrat, in the sense that they are very, very good for their points. And they fulfill a lot of different roles. But because there's a lot of them in my list, I found it very difficult to put models like that on my list. So I really focused on models that either for their points or just for the abilities they have are just really stupid, and that are just like absolutely insane and can accomplish way more than any model should be accomplishing, or just are extremely cheap for what they do. And that's why I think models like Shagrat, also like Rutabi as well, I think don't necessarily fit on a list like this.
Wait,
Because there are so many. What's up, Mick?
I'm just saying, wait. You're criticizing a subjective list of which we basically like just because we like the model.
I don't think that was in our I don't think that's what the goal was, though. What were we supposed to be? Wasn't it supposed to just be like objective, like what we think are the strongest models?
No, it was just supposed to be the top 5 models. I mean, you can define it however you like.
Exactly.
I don't think your way to define it is wrong, but I don't think I don't think there's any criteria saying that these were supposed to be objectively the strongest models. It's just it was going to be our favorite top 5 models. For whatever reason.
Yeah, because
that doesn't change the fact that I disagree with those placements. That's all I'm saying.
That's all fine. Right. That's fine. You can have your own placements, and we can all have our own placements.
Can I talk about the Lake Town Guard now?
Do it. Oh my God, he's just so broken.
Yeah. So this was my 5th choice, which was the Lake Town Guard. He's a standard infantry model, move 6, fight 3, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 2, comes with armor and a sword. You can buy him a bow, you can buy him a spear. So you're saying, why is this guy so special? The reason is he's 5 points. And he's 5 points, and he exists in an army where he can get buffed up to fight 4 with a banner from the master. And when the reason this guy's in my list is I was thinking back on this, and he was in, I think, just about every, certainly more than 2/3 of the list of the good lists that both Evan and I created over the course of the past year. And I think just given that utility of being able to take a whole bunch of cheap guys, put them in a good list, bolt on heroes of your choice with the remaining 500 models and still have a decently sized army. I'm not sure there's anybody that quite compares to that utility. I mean, he's kind of like the building block of a lot of good lists these days, and that's why I had to put him at 5.
Well, he is probably the best infantry in the game, the most optimal, the most cost-effective infantry thing in the game.
I would disagree with that, but we will discuss that later on in my list as well.
So,
okay.
I mean, I'm not certain he's kind of the best infantry. Well, depends how you define best. He certainly fills in a hole on the good side of good cheap bulk, right? There really isn't anybody who kind of comes close to him for good cheap bulk. He's the good side's goblin equivalent, and the only other guy on the good side that kind of fits that bill are hobbits, and hobbits are overpriced and slow. So you can't really use them in that role. So, all right, Evan, what's your top 5 pick? Or actually, we've done your top 5 picks, so we need to
Rainier,
go to Rainier. Who's number 4 from Rainier?
Let me quickly see. Oh, well, we gotta go to Rob. Oh no, Rainier first.
Yeah.
Rainier's number 4. Well, this one's like super broken. This one should definitely be on this list. Let's see, Khandish Chieftain in a Chariot. So I believe I know why Rainier picked him.
Good luck with this one, Mick.
Because Rainier loves Khandish Chieftains in Chariots. I mean, well, there's nothing wrong with them in my opinion.
What are the stats?
What are the stats? Okay, so it is actually, oh yeah, this is Khandish Chieftain, not Khandish King in a Chariot too.
Right.
So the Chieftain, I don't have my rulebook on me, but as far as I remember,
who could have thought you might need that?
He is 5'5". Yeah, he's 5'5", strength 4, defense 5. I'm guessing here. 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4. I'm pretty sure, with 2 points of might, 1 or 2 will, probably 1 will.
1 will. 1 will. You were doing
fate.
great up to that point, and 1 faith. Right.
1 fate, yeah. And yeah, he comes in Chariot. His heroic actions are heroic march. That's about it, because he's a captain. But the major thing here is that as a chieftain, oh no, sorry, he did pick a chieftain. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, as a chieftain, he is 5'5", which normally captain level heroes are not 5'5". So that is one big thing where when you're playing as many players, they might not realize that he's 5'5" and accidentally make a mistake, which will cost them their game. Because normally people expect someone like the Khandish King to be only 5'5", but then it turns out the Khandish Chieftain actually comes over, smashes you with his 5'5" and a chariot, and wins the game. Obviously, the chariot's really good when it rolls well. When it rolls well, not so good when it doesn't. So yeah, it all depends on your playstyle. Obviously, Rainier is really good, like with these sort of chariot heavy armies of evil men. He loves evil men. But I don't really have very much experience of chariots. I think I do own a couple of chariots, but I may have used them like once. So I think that's gonna be it for my review of a chariot with a Khandish Chieftain on it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got chariots too. I've used them a few times. I've always been disappointed by them. I don't think I've ever used them kind of en masse as Rainier does, and I don't claim to have the skill with them that Rainier has. So I guess I'm slightly skeptical of that, especially kind of vis-a-vis the Condish King, because the ability to strike up on a base that's that big is kind of important, but I'm sure he has his reasons.
I mean the fight 5 is always a surprise there.
Isn't the king fight 6 though, or did they
No,
nerf
he's
him
fight-
down to
he's
fight
also
5
he's
in
fight
this
also
five.
he's
edition?
also
Yeah.
fight 5.
But
Yeah.
he's like a 6-inch banner though, right? Or something
He is.
ridiculous like that.
Yeah, he is a
Yeah.
6-inch banner for
I mean,
Condish stuff.
Makes
I
30 points
don't
more.
know if he like has the king higher on this list or something,
He's-
but honestly, I would rate the king better than the chieftain.
Yeah,
in
he's
my
actually
opinion.
40 points more. So he is a lot better, but you pay a lot more for him. So I mean, I kind of I understand the kind of the cheap utility of the Condish chieftain, but even when you put him on the chariot, he's still 85 points. And 85 points for a guy that can't strike up can be a bit pricey, but
King's also 3 attacks.
he has 3
Wow,
attacks.
he's good.
Yeah, no, I mean the king is good.
And he's got March too.
He does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really agree with this placement, just because I don't really rate chariots that much. They feel very exploitable to me, but obviously this is Rainier's list, and he knows how to play these guys. I don't, so that's basically all I have to say.
Yeah,
It's
and
it's
he's
a
not here to
subjective
defend it.
list.
So
It's a subjective
Yep,
list.
it's
so-
subjective.
Doesn't mean that subjectivity, that doesn't mean it can't be criticized. You can't
That is true. That is
You
true.
can't just
Yeah.
say like, oh, I'm being subjective about my opinion, so you can't criticize me. I'm just saying I don't understand it personally, man.
Yeah.
That's all I'm
Sure.
saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I fully
I mean,
fully appreciate that.
Rainier can be subjectively wrong. There's nothing
Sure.
there's nothing improper about that. Okay, so let's go to Rob. So Rob's choice for number 4 was Theodred, heir of Rohan.
Oh, I love this guy.
A bold choice. So Theodred is 80 points. He's fight 5, strength 4, defense 6. He has 3 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 5, 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. Comes with his heavy armor and sword. He has heroic strike and, of course, heroic challenge. You can buy him with a horse shield and throwing spears. He's got the usual expert rider and horse lord, and he has the reckless charge. He must charge an enemy model if he's able to do so, which can be problematic at times. And additionally, on a turn in which he charges, he can re-roll any failed to wound rolls during the fight phase. Evan, maybe you can talk about Theodred. I mean, I have to say, I think I can. I'm not certain I've ever played him, and I think the number of times that I played against him, I can count on the fingers of one hand. So I know you've played with him a lot more recently, so maybe you can talk about him a little more.
I played with him on our account as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Both Mick and I have played a lot of him. But I mean, the thing about Theodred is that he's 80 points, so he's similar points to something like a Huron or a Forlong or something like that. And he's just kind of better. Like, honestly.
Not just kind of, he's like way better.
Well, yes, he's way better. I was being subtle, but yes, he's way better. Because he's got 3 attacks, which they don't have. B, he's got 3 will points, which is very good against casters, where the other heroes only have 1 will point. And he's also got horse lord, so if he takes a wound on his horse, he can use his fate point to prevent that. And he's also got reckless charge, which sure means that he has to charge, but it also means that he re-rolls any failed to wound rolls during the fight phase. So he's basically just an extremely cheap nuke.
He's a mini
and
Spider
in my
Queen.
opinion, sure, we'll go with that.
With no
but yeah,
broodlings
whenever
and
he's-
6 fewer legs.
He's a mini Spider Queen in that he goes in, he wrecks stuff, he then dies, but by then you don't care.
I mean, I've never had him die before, so for me, he just runs in and wrecks stuff.
Every time dies for me.
Clearly, we're playing a different Theodred. Mine is much more self-preserving, I guess. But I I guess the weakness that a lot of people identify with him is that he has to charge. But I mean, honestly, I've never had that be a problem for me anyways. Like, the only time I would really see it being an issue is if he's trying to capture an objective, because otherwise you can just like make a wall of guys in front of him so he can't charge, and then sort of move the guys out of the way and let him loose. So honestly, I can see why he'd make a list. Not personally on my list, but he's definitely a very good model.
I have to say, there's been one instance so far in like 20 games where him having to charge was a bad thing, and that was in Clash by Moonlight, when he unfortunately had to charge my opponent's Imrahil, and if he were to die, I would lose the game, but he didn't. I think he wounded Imrahil in the end, so so it was all fine in the end. But yeah, that was like the only time where I was like, oh, actually, if he charges and dies, I'm actually losing this game. But there's nothing I can do to stop him. But in every other instance, the fact that he died a lot of the time was irrelevant because he'd caused enough damage by then.
Yeah, I think the one time I played him, I think I had a couple of ring wraiths and like was able to compel the two people that were I can't remember what happened, but somehow I was able to use the ring wraiths to get him into a position where he like couldn't block himself in. I think he was kind of off on his own with a couple guys that could hold him back, and once I froze a couple of them in place, then he had to charge something really big and died. But I think it was maybe like, I think it may have been like my Witch King on Fellbeast or something like that. But that was, I think that was an edge case.
Yeah, he requires very precise play, which is part of what kept him off of my list. Because if you mess up with him, he's basically just dead. And then at that point, that's 90 points down the drain. But if you play him well, then he can really get a lot of bang for your buck.
Yep. All right, Ev, what's your number 4?
Well, my number 4 is Bird Jesus himself, Gwahir. And
Jesus.
So going over his profile, we've got fight 8, which is obviously huge. Strength 6, defense 8. So he's got tons of good stats. The main weakness that a lot of people see in him, which is the fact that he does have only 2 attacks, but 3 wounds, courage 6, and 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. And then, of course, the important things are his heroics and special rules. He's got both heroic strike and heroic defense, which are obviously great abilities. He's also got heroic strength if you ever feel like doing that. He's also got fly, which is huge. Being able to move 12 inches and move over all models is a game-defining ability. He's got monstrous charge, which basically defines whether or not a monster is viable or not. And him having that is extremely important. Terror is nice. And he's also got Lord of the Eagles, which is sort of like his negative special rule almost, which is that only Eagle and Wizard models that for some reason may benefit from Gwahir's stand fast or benefit from his heroic actions. I guess the thought process behind that is like Gandalf can understand him, so Gandalf can benefit, though I'm not sure.
Well, and Radagast can fly the eagles around.
Yeah,
so.
Radagast can, but Saruman I don't really understand. I don't think he'd really care. But anyways, moving on from that, so the one issue he does have is that he can be somewhat unreliable due to his low number of attacks. So that's 2 attacks plus 1 on the charge, so only 3 attacks. But other than that, he's just honestly perfect. Fight 8 is amazing. No one is ever out fighting him except for like Gil-galad and Sauron and the Balrog, which, I mean, if you're having him fight those guys, I'm not sure that's the correct decision anyways. He's almost impossible to kill. because of his defense 8 and 3 wounds, 3 fate, and heroic defense. And just the ability to have a flying monster model with monstrous charge at a bargain basement price of 150 points, coupled with the fact that he is 3 might points, just makes him, in my opinion, one of the strongest monsters, also coming out to an extremely cheap price that makes him hard to resist, even though he can't lead any troops. Just taking him in an army will never make that army bad. Like, no matter what you ally him into, he's going to add value to that army.
All right.
Yeah,
Fair point.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any of us would disagree with including Guy here on a list like this. So even though he's not on mine. So Mick, what's your number 4?
My number 4. Are we supposed to go to Rob's?
No, we did Rob's.
I think we did.
Oh yeah,
Rob's,
sorry,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was Theodred. Well,
Yep.
my number 4 was since he had the little Spider Queen, I have the big Spider Queen. So the big Spider Queen is the Spider Queen, 115 points, same as Shagrat actually. She comes with fight 6, strength 6, defense 4, 2 attacks, 3 wounds, and courage 4. 3 might points in this edition, which is quite new, which makes her quite powerful. And she also has 3 points of will and no fate. So the points of will very often get used for her special broodling ability, where during her move, she can use points of will to deploy broodlings, which are these little tiny spiders that for some reason these days move 10 inches as well. So
little tiny fast spiders.
Yeah, that's one of the things that has caught me off guard when the new edition came through, because for over a decade previously they were moving only 6 inches, and then suddenly so she is really good at getting the little spiders out and either grabbing objectives, jumping somewhere behind enemy lines, or just running off the table and scoring you points for no particular downside. When she charges, she pounces, so she gets the monster's charge, so knocks things over. And most importantly, she rerolls all of her strikes to wounds. So with strength 6 and a heroic strike, and rerolls, she gets to roll 6 dice and reroll everything, which means most enemies tend to die when she wins combat. Also, as a spider, she goes through difficult terrain at full speed, so that's great. Yeah, there's basically like very few downsides to the Spider Queen. She comes with heroic defense, so her defense 4 isn't that big of an issue now as it used to be in the past. But obviously, if you haven't done your heroic defense and you fluff your dice, you may just randomly die to like whatever. So there is that. So overall, she's just like a very solid offensive choice, especially if you're able to bring her with a big army, with a swarm of some sorts. Because then even if you lose her, it's not that big of a deal. But she's just so strong at running into something, killing it, running into something else, killing it, and sometimes it's just game breaking, game winning sort of situation.
Yeah. I mean, the only downside that comes with it, I think, is her vulnerability to shooting, because you can't call a heroic defense against shots. And
that's true.
If you leave her in a spot where she can get shot, she'll die.
I mean, Legolas is kind of a major downside, because throughout the game he can just snipe. Because against any other shooting, it's okay most of the time, because
she does also get hit by a rock and die instantly.
Yeah, that's true. Or by a ballista.
Yeah. I mean, or a volley of crossbows, right? I mean, I've done this to her a couple times with like something like Corsairs or something like that, where even if you put like 2 ranks of things in front of her, and if enough shots get through, she'll die. So
there's a reason why I almost always take her with the Shadow Lord, and that's because she's extremely weak to basically any form of shooting. Another weakness of hers I'll point out is that she is quite vulnerable to magic, because unlike many other heroes, her will points come with a trade-off because you're supposed to use them to make broodlings. So when you cast spells on her, she resists with her will points, and that means she doesn't have her broodlings anymore. So that makes her quite vulnerable to magic. All that being said, however, I think I would put her at number 6 on my list, if there were to be a number 6.
I knew she wasn't gonna
and
make your list, Evan. Something told me.
you don't have to phrase it like that, Nick. But yeah, I do love her a lot. Spider Girl's great. And she's got a ton of great things. So yeah.
Yep. So all right, so my number 4. My number 4 is the Easterling Cataphract, surprisingly enough, and a specific Easterling Cataphract, and that's the Easterling Cataphract with the 15-point war drum. So I don't think we need to dwell very much on the stats. I mean, it's a cavalry, so move 10, fight 3, strength 3, defense 6, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3. So kind of a blah-ish cavalry figure. If you get him within 6 inches of the Dragon Emperor, it goes up to fight 4, and you can buy a Black Dragon upgrade for 2 points, which you almost always do, and that would get him up to fight 4, fight 5 within 6 inches of the Dragon Emperor, and then becomes kind of more of a cavalry figure to be reckoned with. But the real reason you take the Easterling Cataphract is the 15-point drum, which is a huge tactical boon to the entire Easterling army, and any army that you have an Easterling contingent in, because you can start moving 9 inches a turn with your foot, and if you have cavalry, you can be zooming around at 15 inches a turn, and it gives the Easterlings ability to kind of to jink and take their phalanx and put it someplace where the other folks weren't expecting it within the course of 1 turn, and that's a big tactical option. We're having different philosophies as to why we're picking stuff to put on the list. I was going primarily off of which are the models that I ended up like taking the most during the course of the last year, and every time you take, I've been playing the Easterlings a lot because I think with the new buffs, they're great and they're fun to play with. And literally every time you take an Easterling army, you take an Easterling Cataphract. It's literally the first model that you choose in every army. I don't think I've ever seen anyone build an Easterling army or even insert an Easterling contingent without a Easterling Cataphract, and that's why he's there.
Yeah, it's a very solid choice.
So, all right. So I think we now go back to Rainier's number 3.
We do. And Rainier's number 3 is Amdur, the Lord of Blades.
Right. The Lord of Special Rules.
Yes.
Yes.
Now then, where's my rulebook? He is fight value 6, strength 4, defense 6, I believe, right?
Yep.
He comes with 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6.
It's actually courage 5.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, courage 5. With might will fate of 333, right? No, 331.
Actually 331.
331, that's right. So he used to be the main hero of the Easterlings alongside Camul, but he is no longer after Rutabi and the Great Dragon Emperor and all that stuff. So he can come on mounted on an armored horse, which helps him. His special rules include, he also has Blood and Glory, just like Shagrad. So if he kills an enemy hero in combat, he regains points of might. He has a heroic strike. He is also a banner, or he.
Well, so why don't I've got the rules in front of me. Why don't I go through the special rules, because they are legion.
There's a lot of them.
So I guess the first thing is we shouldn't forget he comes with an elven made hand and a half sword. So he actually has an elven blade, which is useful when tied fight values come up, which because of some mechanics happen more often for him than for others. He has blood and glory, so he regains might by killing heroes. He has unyielding combat stance, so if he is on foot, he can pop back up again. He has the phalanx special rule, so he can fight in the midst of a phalanx. It's the Gleaming Horde special rule, which is basically shield wall for cataphracts. So if he's in a group of cataphracts, as he often is, and they're touching base to base, they get +1 defense. So that can get him up to defense 7. He has Herald of Victory, which Easterling models treat him as a banner. If he kills the enemy leader in combat, which happens kind of rarely, the banner increases to 6 inches. Then his premier special rule is Lord of Blades, which is whenever an enemy model in combat with Amdur declares a heroic strike, he can immediately declare the same thing for free. And if he's already declared a heroic action, he can change it to a strike, which is interesting. So what this basically means is he can go toe to toe with another fight 6 hero, and the other fight 6 hero is in a dilemma, because if he calls a strike, Amdur just copies it, so you haven't really gained anything. If you don't call the strike, it's a fight 6 to fight 6 roll off, and Amdur's got an elven blade, and maybe your fight 6 hero doesn't. So that's a dilemma. And of course, if he gets into a combat with somebody who's fight 5 or below and they call a strike, he can just copy it for free and have an edge in getting the fight value. So that's, as long as he's not fighting somebody who's fight value 7, he's a pretty good hero killer.
Yeah, I think what I find about Amdur is that it's a bit of a shame that Rutabi exists, in my opinion, because Rutabi is just more efficient at everything. And I thought it would have been really cool to see more Amdurs in all those lists with the Dragon Emperor and stuff like that, because he's just like a really cool hero in general. There's a lot of options with him, with all of his special rules, and he comes out at 145 points, as far as I remember, when he's mounted.
Right.
So he's actually like not that expensive. Like if you compare him to the likes of Imrahil, like he can hold his own against that sort of stuff, and he's really good at just chopping down warriors. So yeah, I kind of wish that there were more people using him, but it looks like Rutabi has kind of taken over the second in command sort of spot for all of the Dragon Emperor lists.
Yeah. So that's the downside of Amdur is if you're taking Amdur, you're not taking the Legion. It's really tough to fit both Amdur and Rutabi in the list. It's also there's a whole bunch of benefits that come with the Dragon Emperor that we'll talk about in a bit that key off of the Legion, and Amdur's not in the Legion.
Yeah.
So Amdur is 130 points, but he comes with something on the order of a 36-point penalty for not taking the Legion, which makes the opportunity cost of putting him in a list really high. And he's a good model, but if what he has become, I guess, is a good way to ally Easterlings into a list, which is, I think, what Rainier uses him for. He uses him for like an Easterling ally into a conned list. And I think he's still good at that because he's a powerful model. He's at a point cost. He's a hero of valor, so he can ally in. He's at a point cost where you can get him and a bunch of other guys added into a list. But I think in terms of a pure Easterling list, like I said, the opportunity cost of bringing him is too high at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just one of those things where he costs also the same amount of points as someone like Gothmog.
Yeah.
And if you compare them, like if I was allying someone in and I needed certain special rules or certain troops, I probably would be swaying towards allying Gothmog with some orcs or Moran orcs rather than Amdur with some Easterlings. But yeah, that's more of a personal choice, I guess.
Okay. All right, shall we go to Rob's number 3 choice? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
say my piece here. I agree with a lot with what you guys said. And it sort of feels like we're poo-pooing Rainier a lot here. But I do
But
feel
he's
that
not here to
like there
defend
are,
himself, so who cares?
yes, so we can hurt him as much as we want. But it does feel to me like there are a lot of heroes, sort of what Mick said with Gothmog, that are similar points values that just offer more
Are just
A to
better.
their army
Yeah.
list and B in general. Like something like an Imrahil, I'd say, who's I think like 15 points more. He's 160, and he's got the 12-inch banner. He's got a lance, which is super huge, because Amdur sometimes has killing power problems due to his strength 4. Models like that I feel like just sort of eclipse him in what they're able to accomplish for the points they are.
Yeah, or like the Dragon Emperor, which after you've taken all of your Easterlings, essentially ends up being the same points as Amdur.
Okay, so let's go to Rainier, or I'm sorry, Rob's number 3 choice, which is the Knight of Dale. The Knight of Dale is 11 points. He is fight 4, strength 3, defense 6, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 4, heavy armor, spear, sword, and shield. And he comes with the Wall of Blades special rule, which gives him a +1 to wound when making strikes with a spear against the model that charged them this turn. So this is the kind of the shield wall hoplite phalanx addition to the army of Dale, where you have your line of these guys in front with leveled spears, some guys with spears and bows behind, and you wait for the enemy to charge you and you take your +1 to wound. Yeah, this is a decent model. I've got some of these on my painting. We have a bunch. I've got some more on my painting table right now. They're good to use, and Rob has always been a fan of Dale, and I understand why he puts these in here. Getting a Dale army, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to get a Dale army to really be at a competitive level. I mean, their legion is their legion is good and has some good benefits. The problem comes with, even with the new leaders that they have, they lack kind of a certain punch, because they have some good special rules, but they're fight 5, they're not mounted. And you've got a bunch of expensive guys around them, so the size of the army isn't huge. I mean, I think they're a good army. I'm not certain that they're a great army. And the only reason I would kind of question this pick is I'm not sure how much utility these guys have outside of the Dale army, which is I'm uncertain about.
Yeah, I agree. I think Dale definitely suffers from a problem of their heroes just being not good. And just not being able to provide what those sorts of heroes need to provide, which mainly comes down to hitting power. But also, other than the legendary Legion bonus of auto pass courage for everyone, the heroes don't really provide any like troop boosting effects either, which is something you generally want out of those sorts of heroes. You want either hitting power or the ability to buff the rest of the army in some way. And because they provide neither of those things, it sort of makes it difficult for Dale to function. I mean, I like the Dale Warriors. I think they're pretty solid, but yeah, especially with the fact that A, they're in the Dale army, and B, there's nothing that I really find too exceptional about them. Yeah, I'm not sure about them, but Rob plays a lot of Dale, and he seems to think they're very good. So that's that.
Yeah.
All right.
I personally never really had problems with Dale, but well, playing against Dale. So
Right.
no other comments.
Fair enough. Evan, what's your number 3?
My number 3, the classic choice that I'm sure you guys all expected, Arnor Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I picked a very different warrior model. And I was actually debating between taking these guys and taking what Dad put it as his number 5, which is the Lake Town Guard. And I ended up picking these guys. The main reason is that just point for point in general, these are the best warriors in the entire game. They're 8 points, which is extraordinarily cheap. And for those points, they get both a spear and a shield. So if you take those away, technically, they're 6 points, but obviously they do have to come with both the spear and the shield. And for that, they've just got insane stats. They've got fight 4, strength 3, which is fine, defense 6, which is huge. And they even added on hatred Angmar to them for whatever reason, just as sort of like a free special rule, which is nice. Their main weakness is their low courage, but whenever you take these guys, you're either going to A, take them with Círdan, or B, take them as a pure army, which allows for Arvidui to have a 6-inch auto pass courage bubble anyways. So that's not even a weakness. And the list that you're going to take them in are either going to be pure Arnor at lower points, which has actually been proven to do quite well. Multiple people have won tournaments or podiumed in tournaments of lower points values with pure Arnor, or at higher points, they make a very good ally in with either Rivendell or one of the other lists. You can even take impossible allies with them. You can take something like a Saruman, and they still function fine. But just the sheer magnitude of how cheap these guys are for everything they bring is just makes them, in my opinion, superior to any other troop option in the game. And if you were to see them in something like a Gondor list or something like that, oh god, you'd see them absolutely everywhere. The only restriction they have is their alliance matrix, and even that gives them some very good options.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've been toying with some Arnor lists recently, and obviously it's the who do I ally in issue, but yeah, I otherwise full agree.
Yeah, they're good. They're good. They're solid.
All right, so Mick, what's your number 3?
My number 3 was also a warrior. For me, it's the Goblin Prowler. So this is a choice mainly because of the new Legendary Legion, which wasn't around when we're recording this last time, a year or 2 years ago. So the Goblin Prowlers are 7 points apiece, and they come with fight 3, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 2. They also suffer a -1 penalty to winning combats because they only come with a 2-handed axe, and they have throwing daggers. So just like goblins, they get the benefit for their jumping and climbing, and they also have the special rule where if they trap somebody, they get +1 to wounds. So alongside their army bonus, well, the Legendary Legion bonus for the Assault on Lothlorien, and their special rule and their axe, they're able to get +3 to wound when they win combats. So that can be very, very strong, especially since their weapon of choice is an axe, so they can go into strength 4 with piercing strikes. So it is possible to actually kill somebody on a 2+ or even a 1+ once they win. So with that in mind, oh, there's some music playing in the background.
Yep. Right,
so with that in mind, and the special Legendary Legion bonus, which makes them fight at night all the time, basically they've become the sort of staple model for the army, for the Legendary Legion, because you get to walk around, throw your daggers with +1 to wounds, and then you get to charge with them. So I really like them primarily because when they don't do well, they die really quickly. But when they do well, they're just very good. So I find that in a sense, they're kind of like one of those YOLO type models where you either do really well with them or your whole army just falls to pieces. And so I just think it's kind of a more entertaining, more fun way to play, because you may just randomly die if like your one turn of combat goes badly. And so
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because I contemplated putting them on there, but actually kept them off because of that problem that they do tend to, when they win fights, they do great and they kill stuff. When they lose fights, they die like flies. Which is okay because they're cheap and you can kind of like, you can have as many as flies as you want in the army, but they do, if they run into somebody that's strength 4, they do, in particular, they die very quickly.
yes. I mean, they die very quickly against everything whenever they lose combats.
That's true.
Yeah, but I just find them to be quite a fun and challenging model, because with the +1 to wounds with the throwing daggers, you can do a lot of walking around, throwing, walking around somewhere else, throwing again, charging in, throwing, doing a lot of damage before you actually fight. So I find that they provide a nice, fun, new tactical way of playing with where you don't have to necessarily engage into combat all the time.
Yep, fair enough.
So yeah,
Yeah.
fun model.
Yeah,
I think
the only thing that kept them off my list is sort of what we talked about earlier, which is they die like flies, and at least in games I've played against them, they lose a lot of fights, which makes them very vulnerable. Because the -1, coupled with the fact that they're only fight 3, sometimes means that they're going to lose a lot of fights and then they die. And they're not quite as cheap as other goblins are, because usually when you've got a goblin, you lose a fight, you lose a goblin, that's fine. But these guys, if I'm not mistaken, are 7 points.
they are 7 points. Yeah.
Which makes them a bit more expensive, which means that you suffer more if you lose them. But obviously the whole their killing power is insane, and the fact that they've got their stupid throwing weapons that get +1 to wound because of the darkness and hit on 4s means that they are extremely good models.
Yep. All right. To keep this moving, I'm going to go to my number 3, which is Borgir the Conjurer, who's 80 points.
You're just putting all of the Easterlings in your list there, Dad.
Well, we'll see. So he's
Yes.
He's one of the new Easterling heroes that showed up in Defense of the North. He is fight 3, strength 3, defense 5, 1 attack, 2 wounds, courage 4. He has 2 might, 5 will, and 2 fate. So for a caster, he's got some stats. He has the battle stave, which can be used as a spear or a 2-handed axe. He obviously he can channel, and he's got the Sorceress Adept rule that allows him to, whenever he rolls a 6 on a casting test, he basically doesn't spend the will, which can really extend out that 5 will. He's in practice, he's got at least 6 and occasionally more will to play around with. And his spells are Blade Wrath on a 2, Fury on a 3, Enchanted Blades on a 4, and Tremor on a 5. And the ones you end up using are Blade Wrath, in particular on the Emperor, because it affects not only him but the Palanquin. So you get a whole bunch of strength 6 attacks if you're casting that on the Emperor. Fury if you're running into a terror problem. And then his go-to spell is Tremor, which is basically the strength 6 cannon attack that he has, where you pick a target, hit that guy, and then draw a line of d6 inches afterwards. And so, I mean, I've talked about Borgir before. He basically, there's 3 different modes here. He's either does average and kills like about 4 models during a game and kind of justifies his points with the other benefits that he brings. Sometimes his spells just don't go off for whatever reason, and he doesn't kill anyone, and oh well. And sometimes he just dominates the game and wins it for you on your own. I mean, I've seen Borgir kill like 10 models in a game with Tremor. And when he has one of those
a
games,
particular game comes to mind for me
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Dad decided to take his dwarves against my Easterlings, and Borgir decided that he was going to kill like 10 dwarves.
Yeah.
And that pretty much sealed the game.
Yeah, and when he does that, he wins the game for you. So he was my number 3 pick. So okay, so we do have to kind of move along here. So let's do the number 2 pick from Rainier.
Right to pick from Rainier is Suladan. So he
Not
is
number 1?
No,
Rainier.
surprise. And
Blimey.
I'm pretty sure that went from number 1 in the past into number 2 now.
I would assume, yes.
Yes. So Suladan, he is 100 points. He can have an armored horse and a bow. He is fight 5, strength 4, defense 5, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. He has poison arrows. Well, in fact, poisoned weapons of all sorts. So he gets to reroll once when he strikes, and he has poison arrows if you've given him a bow, because he's the leader of the Haradrim. He's a hero of legend, so he can take 18 of them. And he is also a banner, so his range is 6 inches. So he does a great job at providing very, very cheap banner support to everybody, whilst being relatively cheap to bring 18 models. He's just like pretty solid hero overall. His main downside is his defense 5, which means if he's your leader, it's very common that he's going to take a wound. And with only 1 point of fate, that has actually cost me games in the past. But other than that, he's just like very reliable, very good hero, especially if you ally him in with someone like the Witch King and give the Witch King the leadership of the game, of your army. Then Suladan is just a very solid choice. 4 attacks and charge plus reroll. Who doesn't like it?
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so for Rob's number 2 choice, he had the Fountain Court, and for the guards of the Fountain Court, they are, I'm not capable of spitting these stats off the top of my head. I do know they are
I remember.
Fight 4.
Probably can.
Yeah, I got it. They're fight 4, strength 3, defense
7.
6, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage
7.
3. Yeah, courage 3, but bodyguard. So the courage 3 doesn't come into it. They have heavy armor, dagger, and spear. You can replace the spear with a banner, which you never do. There are cheaper ways to put a banner in this list. And you can get a shield for +1 point, which I think you should
Defense
usually
7.
do if these guys are going to stand in the front rank and give you defense 7 all the time. And they are definitely a solid foot choice at 11 points for having a bodyguarded fight 4 defense 7 model. The only real downside about the Fountain Court is that they're expensive to buy and they don't come with shields. So you have to come with some way to kind of model the shield on them. That's really the only downside to the Fountain Court. But they are definitely a solid choice for filling out an army.
Well, the other downside is that technically there were only 4 of them, and people take armies of like 24. So
yeah, but we don't care about
Lord,
that.
we don't care about
Very
that.
thinly. Yeah. I mean, when you take them with Boromir, you get a fight 5, defense 7 wall, which I think the only way to replicate that would be if you allied in elves and dwarves together. And with this, you don't have to do that. You can just take Boromir with banner, which you're taking in probably most of your Gondor lists anyways, and then just take a basic troop and spam them out. And there you go. You've got your crazy fight 5, defense 7 banner supported line.
Yep.
And yeah, they're just really insane.
All right. So Evan, what's your number 2?
Number 2, I'm sure actually though, no one will be surprised about this one. And it's my sweet, sweet baby boy, Gullivar, the Terror of Arnor. So to go over his stats, I mean, I don't think I even need to flip to the page. He's got fight 7, strength 8, defense 5, which is bad, obviously. Star attacks, which we'll talk about later, 4 wounds, courage 4, and 3 might, 3 will, and 0 fate. Now, of course, the big benefits you get from him are with all of his special rules, which are many and all extremely powerful. So the first one, the first 2 to point out are ones I talked about with Gua here as well, which are, of course, the fly and monstrous charge special rules. And the other important special rule to point out is his strength of body, strength of will, which basically means that his attacks and courage are always equal to his remaining wounds. So at 4 wounds, which is where you want to keep him, he is courage 4 and 4 attacks, which means, yes, that is right. When he is charging in with full wounds, he has 4 attacks with monstrous charge, making that 5 attacks. He's at fight 7, so he's winning most of his combats. And then when he knocks the model down, he gets 10 strikes at strength 8, which basically means that any model you charge with him dies if you win the fight. So he's got a couple of weak. Oh, and to point out as well, he's also got Immortal Hunger, which means even if you do wound him, he can just go and munch on a couple troops, get all his wounds back, and then run back into the fight. He is just an incredible model, because there is, I think, basically nothing that he can't kill.
Is there nothing he can't kill?
I don't think I've run up against anything with him where I've gone, oh yeah, I can't kill that. Except maybe like a Balrog or something like
Fairy
that.
defense models.
Yeah, those 2, but generally you've got the Witch King or a Barrow-wight or something like that, which can just transfix them and just stop them from doing what they want to do, and then you kill them with Gullivar afterwards. So he does have a couple of flaws. One I'm going to start with, which I don't believe to even be a flaw, but I think people will point out, is that he doesn't have Heroic Strike. The reason that's not a flaw is because in all of my games I've played with him, I don't think I've ever thought that he needed to use Heroic Strike once. And that may just come down to how I play him, but I know other people here have played him, and I mean, have you guys ever found situations where you feel like you need his Heroic Strike?
Well, if you're really worried about needing heroic strike, you just do heroic defense.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Because the best form of offense is defense.
Nice saying there, Mick. But yeah, his actual weakness is that he's got low defense and no fate. So shooting, especially shooting from something like a catapult or a siege engine that insta-kills, will take him out. And because he's 200 points, that usually means you lose the game. But he's just so insane. He's almost impossible to kill due to the fact that he has heroic defense and the ability to get wounds back. And anything that tries to fight him, unless it's higher fight value than he is, will just die. And that's why he fits into my number 2 spot. And also I took him to Articon, so he's got a special place in my heart.
Gotcha. So all right, cool. I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything to add. We've talked about Gullivar before, and I think he is a great model. So I think we're on to Mick, your number 2.
Yes, this is a model we talked about earlier. It's someone who's also close to my heart because I took him to Articon. It's Theodred.
Uh-huh.
So I guess I'm not gonna repeat myself.
Right.
So yeah,
So
let's move on.
all right. So my number 2 is also a model we've talked about earlier, and that's Rutabi, General of the Dragon Legion. And
I wonder
I
what
touched
number one
on.
could be.
Yeah, good question. I touched on what I like about Rutabi earlier. I think really to sum up how she's kind of used in the list. She has 3 main roles. The first is she gives punch to the phalanx because she's really a hero that's tough enough to take on just about any other hero, and in particular when she's sitting in the middle of a phalanx where she's on foot, but she's on foot with 2 pikes behind her, so she's going to get some extra strikes, and there's foot on either side of her. So it's not like she's going to get ganged up on in most circumstances. And as long as she's staying in the middle of that phalanx, it's she can tank just about anything for quite a while. And if she gets Borgir to cast Blade Wrath on her, or if she traps somebody, she can do tremendous amounts of damage. That's her first role. Her second role is as a secondary might generator with that Master of Battle. And that functions as a way to kind of, because she's in the middle of the phalanx, usually the person who's going to be calling the heroic move on the other side is within 6 inches of that. And that means you're going to get a decent amount of extra points from her. And then her third role is basically just as somebody you can reliably put into somebody else's hero, just to tie them up, because she is very hard to kill. She has the fight 6 stats, and for her 110 points, she can easily tie up 150, 160, even a 200 point hero, because there's no hero that can really say, well, I'm going to charge Rutabi and I know I'm not going to die, with the possibility of Blade Wrath being popped on her and a couple pikemen behind her. So she, there's an argument to be made that Borgir is kind of the better choice for the Easterlings than Rutabi, but Borgir, as I said, can be on or off. Rutabi is always a solid choice, and will always kind of anchor that phalanx in that army. So that's why I chose her as number 2.
Good explanation.
All right, so we have Rainier.
Well, Rainier's number
Number
1
1
is someone that I think both of you are going to be talking about later on. It's the Dragon Emperor.
Yeah, and so the Dragon Emperor was also my number 1 as well, surprisingly enough, seeing as how things were going. And so look, we already talked about the Dragon Emperor's stats. What we didn't talk about is the Dragon Emperor's kind of benefits within the Legion. And one of the biggest things that the Dragon Emperor brings, in addition to all of the stuff that exists in his stats, are, if you take the Dragon Emperor and the Legion, is everybody in the Dragon Emperor's warband gets free upgrades to Black Dragons, which is a 36. Basically, it's 36 extra points that you get to add into the army, which on top of the 6-inch or the 12-inch banner that you can get like 61 points of free buffs out of this figure, and really does kind of anchor this army in a way that very few other figures in the range do. And that and the fact that there are very few things, because of the palanquin and the guys that bear the palanquin and the extra strikes that they bring, and the fact that they can all be Blade Wrathed. I mean, enemy models fear the Dragon Emperor in a way that I'm not sure that another 170 point model causes fear. I played games against people pushing Gullivar, and they're like, I'm not putting Gullivar into the Dragon Emperor because if I lose that fight, I'm dead. And even with a heroic defense being called, that's entirely possible, especially if, say, Enchanted Blades gets called on the Dragon Emperor and they're re-rolling all the 2 wounds. The same thing with even somebody like an Elendil or something like that. They charge in against the Dragon Emperor, and if they lose that fight, they're dead. I mean, the only downside about the Dragon Emperor is you have to be careful with that 80 millimeter base, that the Dragon Emperor doesn't get kind of ganged up on and killed by a bunch of slubs. What can happen with the Dragon Emperor is if, despite the resistance to magic, the Dragon Emperor gets like transfixed and can't strike, then people can kind of go in and be on him with Wild Abandon. And the way to take down the Dragon Emperor is not actually to kill the Dragon Emperor, it's to get rid of the Palanquin, because that gets rid of most of the buffs. And you can do that over the course of a couple turns. So that's really the only downside. So, all right. So that takes care of me and Rainier. I guess we can talk about Rob now. Rob's pick, not surprisingly, was
Does it start with a B?
Faramir, Captain of Gondor. Yes, Rob has thoroughly endorsed Faramir, Captain of Gondor. All right, I'm not going to take this joke any further, but right now, Rob is. Yeah, right now Rob is like tearing his hair out as he's listening to this. But no, it's in fact Faramir's big brother, Boromir, Captain of the White Tower. 160 points. When you throw on the banner, the horse, and the shield, you come in at 215 points. Fight 6, upped by the banner to fight 7, strength 4, defense 6, up by the shield to defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6, a mighty 6 might, 3 wounds, and 3 fate. Comes with Horn of Gondor, which means that if he's outnumbered by 2 to 1, the enemy combatants have to pass a courage test. Otherwise, they automatically lose. This benefit is of surprisingly limited utility because most of the time Boromir is going to win anyway. There have been times that I played him that I've just completely forgotten about the horn, and it's been largely irrelevant because anytime he's been fighting more than one warrior, he just wins anyway. But he does have that benefit, and of course he gets the 6-inch banner with a +1 fight value bubble that brings all of that fight 4 that's from Gondor that's around him up to fight 5. And he is definitely, like the Dragon Emperor is for the Easterling army, Boromir really is kind of the anchor of the Minas Tirith army, at least as they're often deployed, and rightly so.
Yeah, he's very solid, really good.
Yeah.
So that's Rob. We're up to Evan. What's your top model?
My top model, the model I think that is the best in the game, is Elendil. And the reason I picked him, obviously he is 200 points, so he is extremely expensive, just like Gullivar. But he, in my opinion, is the only hero in the game that checks every single box that I look at when I'm looking at a combat hero. So just to go over his stats really quick. Starting off, he is fight 7, which means that he outfights the vast majority of heroes, which is very important when you go on to his other stats, which I'm just going to go over very briefly because I think we have already gone over them. He was Rainier's 5th choice, I believe.
Yep.
So
yeah, we don't need to do this.
5 defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6. He's got the 3-3-1. So the traits that I really want to focus on here are 1, his fight value, which is 7, which is incredibly good. 2, he's got the 3 attacks, 3 wounds, 3 might, which is basically a requirement for these heroes. But then moving on into the serious stuff, which is strength 5 and a Master Forge hand and a half sword, which means he hits extremely hard. And unlike other strength 4 heroes that can sometimes struggle to chop through troops well, or be able to take down those sort of defense 7 bulkier heroes, he has no trouble doing that. He also gets a free heroic combat every turn, which means that he can just churn through troops and even heroes like butter. He can do the classic tactic of bolging, where you charge some warriors, call a heroic combat, and basically force the opponent to strike up, and then you don't even have to charge them. And it's something he can do extremely easily because his heroic combats are all free. And to add on to his power, he's not even vulnerable to magic, because he's got his unbending resolve special rule, which means he gets 2 free resist dice every single time he has a magical power cast on him. And that's what I think really makes him special, because there are some models that have some of these special rules, like for example, Aragorn has free heroics, and he's got Anduril, which means he hits hard, but he doesn't have unbending resolve. Glorfindel, he's got fight 7, he's got unbending resolve, but he doesn't have the hitting power and the free heroic combats that Elendil has. So Elendil is just the hero that combines all of these things together, and it creates, in my opinion, the most powerful model in the game. I've played games with him where he literally just solos an opponent's army, like just him. He goes through, chops through all of the heroes, chops through all of the troops, and the rest of the warriors just kind of stand around while he does everything. And his heroic actions, he's got heroic defense, and heroic strike, which is basically all he needs. The only minor weakness I give to him is that he's only got a horse. And what I mean by that is he doesn't have Horse Lord, he doesn't have a multi-wound steed, so his hitting power can be directly taken away either by using a Sorcerous Blast trick to get him off his horse or shooting him off his horse. Then again, he is almost always allied in with either someone like Círdan or Galadriel, which gives you blinding light, which means that he's more resistant against shooting, so that helps patch up his weakness there. So all in all, because of just how ludicrous he is as a model, I put him slightly above Gullivar at my number 1 spot.
It's a very thorough explanation.
I love him very much.
It's
his,
a bromance.
His weakness is there is he comes with Numenor, but apparently you have an alliance in red to bring him into the third age, probably.
Good that I've just been sort of experimenting with taking him in everything. One of my favorite higher points combinations is taking him with Lothlorien. So doing a Numenor Lothlorien alliance, because taking him with Galadriel gives you a much more reliable blinding light setter. And it also means Galadriel doesn't have to be your leader, so you don't have that contested champions weakness. But yes, I have experimented specifically taking him in Lake Town lists, where he is a red ally, and basically saying, sure, he doesn't get to benefit from heroic moves with them. However, he's just so good that he can react in just heroic combat through entire armies and not need to worry about that. And also never dies, so the auto break thing really isn't a concern.
All right, so the last number 1 call is Mix.
I actually had Scylladan on my top pick still.
Yep.
2 years later. So yeah, he's amazing. He's the best evil hero in the game. That's about it. That's all I can say.
Put a period on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with best evil hero in the game, but he certainly is definitely a go-to evil guy.
I mean,
and
he's technically only 90 points because of the
Yeah.
free banner.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is true. It's just, he bolsters some lists that, at least for me, used to be the go-to evil lists that have now been superseded by the Defense of the North lists. And that's, kind of the reason why he's not there. I mean, I haven't taken him in over a year, and I think it's because I just haven't been taking the lists that he supports and the lists that he makes better. So,
Fair
right.
enough.
Well, okay, so that was it. That's our kind of revised top 5 models. Let us know what you think, and kind of curious to see how you guys would rate stuff. But there we have it, and hopefully we'll talk to you again in a week or so.
Oh, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.